I don't think it's any big secret, not only nationally but locally, the epidemic, and that's not hyperbole, fair to call it an epidemic, what we're coming across in law enforcement in our communities with this opioid addiction. 25 times a month, roughly, an officer here with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department will respond in some way, shape, or form to an opioid overdose. It's almost one a day. Chief Putney, in just a couple of seconds, he's going to go over some really important numbers just to show the scope, the scale of just how big of a problem it's becoming, how big of an issue it's becoming. I think the chief will be the first one to tell you, though, that this really does transcend numbers. It's not about stats, it's not about percentages, it's about people. And you're about to meet a person following the chief. Her name's Melissa Baker, and she is going to put herself out there and leave a comfort zone that few of us would probably venture off to leave, and talk about her daughter, Alexandra, a 21-year-old beautiful young woman who's been in the throes of this for just years, intravenous drug abuse through methamphetamine and heroin, and it's been one hell of a journey for Alex and for Melissa. And I think that what she's really trying to get across today is education, opening lines of communication, maybe pulling away some of the stigma associated with this epidemic. She's also, and Chief and I will also talk about tomorrow evening. We have a big event tomorrow evening over at Calvary Church between 6:30 and 8:30 tomorrow night. It's part of the Chief's Bridging the Difference series, where we're going to get into a real heavy, comprehensive discussion on the opioid epidemic. Melissa will be part of that panel, along with a number of other subject matters experts. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce Chief Putney.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning. I am going to talk about some numbers, but I want you to keep in mind this is more about the human element. This is about human capital. This is about people. And Melissa's going to talk more specifically about the impact on some of our people in this community because of the epidemic that we're facing with opioids. But again, a couple of numbers. First of all, the fatal overdoses for heroin in particular have been increasing steadily. Saw a major jump in 2016, but we really saw the increase start in about 2014. We responded to 122 fatal overdoses from 16 to 17. The data from 2018 is not as strong as we'd like it to be at this point, but we saw from 16 to 17 a significant increase, 35% actually. As Rob said, about 25 overdose calls per month, almost one a day. Thankfully though, as I just said, the majority of those are non-fatal calls that we're responding to. It really impacts us across the jurisdiction. In particular though, we're seeing white males from 20 to 40 in the prime of their lives being impacted greater. That's about 46% of our cases. Also, in the black community, we're seeing it go from about 9.5% over the last 3 years to up about 13%. So again, it's impacting us across the whole jurisdiction, and the trajectory is going up. We also see something that's intriguing and a little bit unique. About 27% of the people impacted don't have a local address. So people are potentially coming here and then being impacted, and we're responding to overdose calls from people who don't necessarily live in our jurisdiction. And also, what's interesting is the vast majority, almost half of these calls that we're responding to are happening in residences. So the majority are happening in private residences and places that you normally wouldn't be able to see it. It's not like it's all over the street, but it's impacting homes, it's impacting people, which is really why I want to have our guests talk through that. The struggle we have is we respond to a call, we know it's potentially an overdose, but later on in the course of the investigation, the medical examiner actually tells us that it is drugs, it is opioids that created the situation that we had to respond to. We're proactively working on it. This is not something we're trying to criminalize as far as those who are victimized by it, and we have more work we want to talk about that at a later date. But we're also enforcing it so that we can aggressively go after those people who are selling it in our jurisdiction. To the tune of 338 arrests we've made for heroin in particular over the last 3 years. As Rob said, big thing we want to do is get the message out. We want to extract the shame and the stigma from this issue. It's an epidemic. It's an addiction. We want to treat it as such. We want to bring services to help people to break this cycle of addiction so that we can start to curb these numbers, save lives, and improve the safety of our community. With no further, I'll turn it over to Melissa to tell you the human impact, and then I'll entertain any questions. Melissa.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here to be part of this discussion. I'm the mother, the parent of a 20-year-old IV drug addict. Alex started out at a young age. She experienced quite a lot of trauma when she was young, and I put every service in place that I could find and locate in this county to help my daughter. At the age of 13, she began abusing her prescription medications by crushing them and snorting them. She really had a wish to die. But I'm an involved parent. I was there for her. Again, I reached out to every service provider you could even imagine to get my daughter help. Last summer, she got involved with IV drug use, with methamphetamine and heroin. Heroin and methamphetamine, that's scary, right? When we think about an IV drug user and we're talking about heroin and we're talking about narcotics, how scary is that? And there's a stigma attached with that. And I can tell you that going through this as a parent has been incredibly isolating. And it's not something that's easy for me to talk about because of the stigma in society. Oh, your daughter's a junkie. We don't like junkies. We don't want to be around you or your daughter. It's not contagious. My daughter isn't going to sneeze on you and then suddenly you're going to start abusing heroin. And the reason I'm speaking up and speaking out and being involved in this topic is because we need to shine light on this. This reaches every socioeconomic group, every part of Charlotte, every part of this country. And I'm a well-educated person. I studied psychology and drug abuse and mental health in college, and even I could not prevent this from happening to my child. And I want parents to understand that you're not alone. Sometimes it feels like it because you're being judged every time you turn around. Well, did you try this? Did you do that? Were you there as a parent? You need to give your child more attention. Maybe you should give your child up for adoption since you're not doing such a hot job. And that's not what we need to be hearing. We need to come together as a community and solve this as a community from the top down, the bottom up, sideways and backwards, because what affects one of us affects all of us.
Melissa, what were the early signs?
So when she started abusing her prescription medication, I noticed that, so if you go to McDonald's, you get a straw in your drink. I noticed that there were cut up straws around the house. And I noticed there was a powder residue inside the straws. Another thing that I noticed, the blister packs of the quercetin medication. Her room was filled with blister packs of cold medication. I said, Alex, you're not sick. Who has a cold? Oh, it's my friend. My friend has a cold. I didn't believe that. I knew she was hurting. Those were the signs early on. But then when I got into the meth and the heroin, methamphetamine, it causes such extreme aggression. And I want you all here today to understand that Alexandra is the most tender-hearted, kind, and loving person. So when I saw my daughter acting out in hugely aggressive ways, I knew that something was wrong. Pale skin, pale gray skin, sweating, sleeping for days. With the IV drugs, a lot of times addicts won't necessarily always go for the same vein. So you're not necessarily going to look in the arm. You can see track marks on the neck or on the legs. And Alex had, one time she had a big ace bandage around her ankle because she had tried to shoot up in her ankle unsuccessfully and she had harmed her vein. As far as the heroin goes, the signs for that, an odd sign, all of my cotton balls went missing. I didn't really know what that was about, but I learned that evidently when you heat up the heroin, and then you suck it up into the cotton ball, and then you take your syringe and get it out of the cotton ball. Evidently, it's more effective to get it that way. Sleeping for days, not eating, hallucinating. And so those were the signs that I saw, just many, many signs.
How does the story end?
The story has not ended well right now. I'm going to be very honest about that. She has moved back to Seattle, Washington. She lives outside of Seattle. And just so you know, my whole family's from there. We've been here 14 years. But she went back to Seattle with her older siblings. And she's essentially homeless. She's living in a tiny little pop-up trailer with no running water, no plumbing, no nothing, on some land. And it's, I don't hear from her often. And I live in fear constantly. Every time my phone rings with a Washington State area code, my heart just sinks because I'm so scared of that call.
What's the role you think police should have in this epidemic?
Honestly, the police have been one of the biggest helpers in my life with my family. We have community resource officers, but I do know in other states, such as where my daughter is located right now, they have a neighborhood police division right now. And these police officers, their entire task is to go out and keep track of the homeless population, the folks who are living in the tents. They interact with them. They will take them to find housing. They'll take them to their drug or alcohol meetings or their support groups. The police are out there because they have realized that you cannot arrest your way out of this problem, as a chief has said in the past. Just personally for me, the police have been so supportive because there has been police intervention in my life, but they talk to me like a real person, and I appreciate that because they will share with me stories of their own struggles, and that helps me feel like I'm not alone. And so that's something I would like to help other people with.
What about the people who are dealing this stuff, selling this stuff? I'm sorry, you can't see. The folks who are selling this stuff on the streets. From your perspective, what are you seeing? What do you think? What do you say?
I have heard, I don't know if this is a true statistic, but I've heard that the United States is the #1 consumer of narcotics and heroin in the world. And part of the issue, so you have a supply and a demand, and as long as you have a demand for that, there's going to be a supply. I'm not happy with the drug dealers, obviously, because what I would say to them, 100% honestly, would you give your little sister heroin or methamphetamine? What if that was your mom or your brother? Would you give them that drug? Would you be selling it to them? People need to think about, and the dealers and the society as a whole. These are human beings. These are human lives. You can call them a junkie or an addict or whatever you want to call them, but they're human beings first. And so I don't have a lot of love for drug addicts, to be very honest with you.
Chief?
Thank you.
All right, so a couple quick things. The reason we're doing this is we told you before we're going to hit some tough topics. This is one of them. This speaks to the heart of some of the issues we're dealing with here in Charlotte. Bridging the Difference, the next forum is going to be at Calvary Church. That's 5801 Pineville-Matthews Road at 6:30 tomorrow night from 6:30 to 8:30. I'd like to also go back to the question about what do we do about the dealers? Well, 338 of them are facing felony cases. We're going to aggressively go after them. I told you my priorities are fighting crime. It'll always be first, engaging the community, and professionally developing this organization. All of those things are going to be constantly a part of the work. Any questions for me? Thank you so much. Appreciate your patience here. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody interested in the photos, just send an email to the CMPD PIO inbox. We'll get those photos out to you if you're interested in that, and we appreciate it.